Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 5 of Douglas County budget hearings. Well, today's day 1 of deliberations, I suppose. We are here with CFD, Consolidated Fire District number 1, to start off the day, and I believe I'm probably turning it over to Sean for that, and then we've got some other topics to discuss later in the morning, commissioners.
Thanks, commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen sharing here. As I'm doing that, just as a reminder, this is a little bit of a follow-up from our budget hearing the other week, and we just want to kind of start off by acknowledging the supplemental requests. So again, there's a supplemental request in your packet that looks at going to add about 10 FTE at Consolidated Fire District. So as part of the presentation the other week, we tried to break that out a little bit in terms of how that could be staggered with options A, B, C, and I'm certain there's other ones in between there as well. But again, we are kind of basing that off of a couple of different things, one of which was a technical review that happened a couple of years ago with the SCI. Where this was a recommended path forward for staffing. So with that all being said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm up and going here. Get to the questions that were asked last week. Some of these are just visual things that we think are a little bit easier to understand that way. So just as a reminder, Consolidated Fire District is a very vast district. So that's the area that's in this sort of yellowish color that surrounds the city of Lawrence. And then also beyond the unincorporated area includes the city of Lecompton. So there was a question about the heat map. So this is exactly that, heat map for 2025. Got to remember, it's not 2005, 2025. I think the compelling point of this is that this district, as you go back, serves a lot more than just Consolidated Fire District. That includes calls into Baldwin City, calls into the city of Lawrence, and on occasion calls into the city of Eudora. There was also a question about the property class breakdown. So you can see it's predominantly residential there. There's a small portion of commercial, but generally speaking, residential is the predominant property class in Consolidated Fire District. Some good questions about low acuity and high acuity. So just trying to define that a little bit for everybody. Low acuity calls are just minor stable conditions. And we've broken that out down on the bottom there, what those call types are specifically referencing. But in 2025, again, the call numbers were about 1,000 calls or incidents every year. 676 of those were low acuity calls. And again, you can see on the my left, the fire-related calls are about 32%. Medical is 67. And then we've also put into that response the volunteer response. We had some sort of compelling data about the number of volunteers or whether the frequency of them showing up, and I just want to kind of have that as a reference point. So moving in then to high acuity calls, those are emergent or critical conditions. Those are things like structure fires or cardiac arrest is typically from a medical side the major concern that we look at from a timing and then a staff response. So again, that was about 312 incidents or about 32% of the call volume. And then across the board, you can see the fire-related calls of high acuity are 31%. For CFD medical, they're responding to about 67% of those high acuity calls. And then again, just as a footnote there, the volunteer response there goes up a little bit to about 30%. The mutual aid is another part or a question that came up. I just got to move a screen really quickly. So in 2025, we've had about 74 mutual aid responses. So these are responses given. So CFD went out of their jurisdiction, and you can see how that's broken out again by fire and EMS. And then in totality, for the last couple of years, it's been around 70 or 74, 75. That is down a little bit over the long term, but generally that's kind of balanced out there. And again, you can read, but the mutual aid requests and these are grass fires or structure fires, and then cardiac arrest.
John,
Yes, sir.
so these are times CFD helps somebody else or somebody else help CFD.
This would be CFD going and helping somebody else.
Okay,
So
thanks.
we would be going into Jefferson County
Gotcha.
as an example.
So, and then just to clarify, when we talk about mutual aid in this context of given and received, the next slide is received. But also understand that some of this is built in automatically through CAD and the ECC. So in other words, this isn't necessarily times when these departments or districts, some of them, they requested our assistance, but many times it's automatically built in. So if there's a structure fire in Willow Springs, or if there's a structure fire in Palmyra, we're added as an aiding department automatically.
And do you have equipment for water rescue as well?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, we just were having a conversation over the last month, twice with Lawrence about how we're going to interact together in our area, but also took that down to the Chiefs Association because of Douglas County Lake and talking with Chief Hirschman in Palmyra. Lawrence and CFD will both be going to there because they don't have the resources to. Sorry, they don't have the resources to do that. So again, we'll be partners going down to that response. Just with this given, just July 3rd, we were down Pizza Hut fire. We were down there supporting Baldwin with RIT functions and staffing earlier that day. When Lawrence on the fire calls their their fire mutual aid given is when we request the medic unit become a fire crew. And earlier that day on the 3rd, we had Lawrence medic crew at work up in Lecompton, and their battalion chief was running incident command because we were coming from such a large distance and didn't have closer chiefs.
Thank you.
And that's because the Pizza Hut was on fire, not just that everybody went to Pizza Hut.
I think one of the things I just want to take a moment to recognize is that this conversation, I think, elevates the notion that this is a broad system, that again, we have a holistic response model here in Douglas County, and Consolidated Fire District plays a major part in that. So kind of skipping ahead to the next part of this, which is the mutual aid received. So this is somebody coming into Consolidated Fire District for the reasons that Clint kind of mentioned. And again, you all can kind of see how that breakdown occurs. So moving ahead to the budget that has been presented, there were a couple of tweaks since you first received it, just based off of some of the feedback we received since last week, and including last week or 2 weeks ago. The major thing that I think you all should know is that, again, like most departments with staff is typically the most expensive part of it. So we did have some health insurance cost increase that were absorbed by the employer. So that also trickled to Consolidated Fire District. And you can see that that net change there was pretty significant for them, considering as a percentage of their total budget, it takes quite a bit. So the other thing I want to kind of point out, and I did the other week as well, is that we are looking to reduce the transfers into the equipment reserve to help support this budget. So before we even get into the supplemental requests, there was a lot of, I think, movement just to try to make sure that we were taking care of, first and foremost, the personnel and ensuring that we've got our service contracts and things like that addressed. But that was a pretty significant reduction, obviously, from that 300,000 that was in 2026, going down to about 163 in 2027. Gentlemen, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to share about this.
I think for the most part, it speaks for itself. But I, it does bear repeating that, you know, we went through it line by line and worked to reduce areas that we've underspent in the past. We worked to make some cuts in places because we knew, you know, what we're asking for.
Yes, and sitting through these and finding where there were ways needing to, sorry, loss of words, tightening up the budget. It's a pretty tight budget that we're going into with and have this year. Again, the employee costs going up that chunk is a big hit in our budget. I know one of the commissioners, I believe is you, Commissioner, really asked about, is there a possibility of starting onboarding early and not with this change? There was, and we were looking forward to it. There might be some other tweaks in that. But the big chunk there really going to put a difficulty into onboarding anybody early if we are approved.
Because of the benefits package, the increase in
Benefits and the overtime that comes into onboarding somebody.
And just one more line I wanted to point out. We talk a lot about sort of fund balance and cash reserve and those types of things. But again, Consolidated Fire District is its own taxing entity. So one of the things that we did adjust was the cash forward balance that goes into 2028. Just trying to make that consistent. Previously, that was actually getting drawn down, so that's structurally unbalanced when you start to do that. So that line is balanced from previous year to next year. And again, just to make sure that we're not taking away from the ability to pay for things at the beginning of the year if there's no funding, obviously. So you've seen this slide before. It hasn't changed, I don't think. But again, the breakdown of this is option A is essentially the supplemental requests that you have in front of you. We've also put together a couple of other options, option B and option C. The staffing adjusts there. So with A, it's the full 10 FTE across those positions with 6 full-time firefighters, 3 captains, and 1 chief officer. Moving into option B, which lessens the financial impact, we would add 9 positions, but would be deferring that chief officer. And then option C is really just baseline stabilization, which is deferring any of the administrative or supervising functions with the 3 captains and the chief officer and simply adding the 6 firefighters. So again, you've seen this before, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of there and stop sharing and open it up for any questions or discussion that you all may have.
Thank you, gentlemen. My first question is just a quick clarifying one, which is, does the spreadsheet we have for CFD1 reflect the bit of changes that you went over? Okay, just want to make sure that's the most up to date. Other questions, commissioners?
not just questions, but we're looking for decisions, right, too?
Yes, both direction at least. I mean, I think I just want to make sure that if there's any clarifying questions about the new information we got, that that's understood by commissioners. I understand that the primary goal for today is to be able to set a revenue an above revenue neutral rate for and determine what the mill will be for our July 15th meeting.
I have a question. Why are we the fire board?
Because state statute says you are. So when they consolidated under this manner, the Board of County Commissioners is the fire board, according to state statute.
And it's when those 5 township fire departments decided to make that move, that was specifically what they expressed that they wanted, was instead of having people looking at like a member from each township and kind of playing one against the other was to have kind of because I'd questioned the same thing, but was to have a more higher level look at the work overall.
We don't have any questions. I will just state that, I stated this at the work session too. I'm supportive of the full increase and the full ask of 10 positions. I think that it's a compelling ask. I think that we have a lot of information to support that increased capacity will make a big difference and really stabilize the department in a way that allows them to build better public programming, and, potentially increase just increase the coverage across such a geographic area that is hard to manage with such a small staff and a depleting volunteer force. So I think that there's a lot of compelling information behind it. I am I'm sensitive to the fact that it's a big mill jump. All things considered, I think that that's in part just a matter of circumstance, and that perhaps, the initial mill setting for CFD1 and the decision to lock that in for a period of time was limiting, and has created the issue that we are facing right now, and that CFD is trying to really strategically build from. So I think that they were hemmed in a little bit, and that this is a way to get them to where they need to be, and that tax increase will come with significant increase in services and the ability to deploy them in a really consistent manner. I guess I do have one clarifying question as I'm looking at the spreadsheet. The workforce stabilization and service reliability, the one-time portion, I think it's probably just because I'm looking at so many numbers and so many lines that piece I'm sort of missed that. Can you just talk to me real quick about what the workforce, the one-time portion is, or why? I mean, I guess I'm just misunderstanding why there's a one-time cost. It's part of
Within the supplemental request.
yes,
Yeah.
within the supplemental.
So a lot of that, or some of that, has to do with the onboarding expenses and the PPE that's associated with it. Gentlemen, I don't know if you want to describe that any further.
There could be some, if we are able to do some internal, but between a set of bunker gear, wildland gear, and a radio, that's the significant chunks of radio, 6,000, 7,000, I believe, for structural firefighting gear, and about 1,000 for.
Thank you for re-summarizing. I just wasn't sticking out to me in my brain, and it's a relatively small number in the grand scheme of it, but thank you.
And I do just want to take the opportunity to just mention that those one-time costs, just going back to the transfer line that we have that is being reduced. So, over time, the hope would be that if those one-time costs are spent for personnel and the equipment and everything is taken care of or addressed, we would be able to at least put that money back into the transfer so that we can continue to modernize and improve our equipment and apparatus.
So I saw in the spreadsheet that 130,000, which would cover all of the onboarding for all of those proposed positions, was put in as an option for one time. And I think that I did not build it in that way, because even though there is an onboarding cost, then you have to put it on the schedule that everybody gets on a replacement schedule for PPE and uniforms and radios, et cetera. So those aren't necessarily one time. And I felt like that building that in as part of the mill levy gave some flexibility to manage the costs associated with the new positions on an ongoing way. So and also that I didn't think we had the capacity within the fund balance for CFD to really manage that as a one-time without building it in for mill levy.
That's a helpful perspective. Just to make sure I understand, is that, I mean, you didn't really share what your thoughts are about the options A, B, or C as sort of presented, but you just added the 130 K to whatever number that was on that line item so that it impacts mill. Is that correct?
So wherever we land with the positions that are added, I think that the PPE uniforms radio 13,000 per person ought to be in
Got it.
in that line also.
Okay.
And I can start talking about where I'm landing with things, but I think we've also heard a lot from me, and I'm curious to hear about what other commissioners are thinking.
I talked to a bunch of folks from Eudora Township, and they appreciated you coming over there last Tuesday and talking about it. They understand the need for professional firefighters, but they don't want a mill levy increase of 4. They would prefer, for this year anyway, the 2.15 option.
I've also talked to individuals, and everyone's very much appreciative of the support, the mutual aid that you have provided, especially this past most recent fire that we had. I have not received any feedback as to not accepting the full proposal. So I could go towards the full proposal. It still is a weighty hit for constituents to knowing that we have a fair amount of rural residents out there, but I also know that they need that service. So I'm still weighing what that is. Commissioner Willie had a really interesting comment about the PPE and whether that should be a one-time cost or whether it should be wrapped into the mill. If we do wrap it in, then that raises it even further. So I'm interested in kind of where you're sitting on this.
I think the ABC options that we were originally given, the mill is tied to it being that the one time is built in.
Oh, it is built in.
Yeah, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Built in as one time, or is it built in ongoing as Commissioner
'Cause
Willie's asked for?
Yeah.
so it's connected to the mill increase, so
So
it would be
ongoing.
ongoing. So that's, I guess, a little bit of my comment about there is no shortage of need in Consolidated Fire District. And that's my reference to the transfer, is that we are decreasing that by in totality, basically. So we're going from 300 to about 150,000. That money would then get put towards to use. If that, I mean, again, that's your all's prerogative, but there would be a plan to continue that in the future and put that towards those types of needs.
The spreadsheet was the first time we'd seen it broken out as a possibility, because, yeah. I also talked to a lot of folks and reached out kind of, and just kind of shockingly, even asking, did not have anyone who had a negative opinion of the full staffing option, unless they lived outside of the district. And then I had some other conversations, which was a little strange. But for anyone who lived within the district of CFD1, they recognized the need, and the conversation was really more about 2 mills this year, 2 mills next year to get there, or 4 mills this year. And that was, and I didn't have anybody who said it felt strongly one way or the other with it. When I looked at the options A, B, and C, I feel like option C is too little, and that's to add the firefighters, but no leadership for it. I did propose somewhere between an option A and option what I called B.5 that I pitched to Sean, which was to add, the 6 firefighters and the chief officer. And why I see that as a bare minimum would be that we have a chief officer who's working for free as a volunteer, who will not always be doing that. So we already have kind of this kind of destabilizing factor, of a fantastic person who's volunteering that work that we can't ask them to do for free for that long period of time. So like that to me felt like the very minimum. My math put it at like 2.65 mils, but I'm very glad to have somebody check me on that because I was making up some things with the benefits. But to me, it's either B.5, and then we have to get up to option A the following year, or to go to option A.
I like your proposal,
Which one?
the 2.65 or whatever it was.
B.5?
Yeah.
B.5 would be, it would be higher than 3.6. Am I correct on that? How would it be less if it's B.5?
It's between B and C. Do you want?
Oh, B and C. Okay. So it's
So-
C.5. Anyways, it doesn't matter, but now I think I'm understanding what you're
B
saying.
minus or C
Yes,
plus.
you can call it whatever you want. That's just fine. As I said at our hearing on the 1st of July, my district, it doesn't take any of this mill levy cost, and yet I take an oath to serve the people of Douglas County. So I'm very interested to hear from my colleagues where they are, and I think for me, there's not a big difference between B and A, and that the total difference there. But I'm also was very interested just listening to the chief about how when they will bring people on, I think B to whatever B.5 is, or maybe just B. I'm interested in those 6 firefighters when they roll up to captain, and is that a way to pace it out? The only other thing I'll say is I think I'm glad we're having this conversation before we have the full budget conversation to think about the impacts on our total mill levy. I'm not saying we're going to bring it down to this number, but I think it's just something to keep in mind about the total tax impacts.
And I guess I'm always sensitive. We intentionally pulled the CFD1 conversation away from our whole budget conversation last year because I get uncomfortable. They're 2 very different populations, different pots. We wear 2 different hats for it. So this is a conversation that the mill levy impact has a geographic distribution that's not countywide. So sometimes I'm not.
I would like to, staff just got this morning in this sort of option B plus. So our B minus, is it B? I think it's B minus. Because if it's between B and C, if it's B minus. So, I'd like to make sure that the maths appropriately before, and maybe we could do that while we move on to other topics and get back before the end of our
And
session this morning.
I don't know that that's where we'll land either.
Okay, I just want to say, I want to,
minimum.
yeah, I want to make sure that the maths.
But, and to be clear, what this option would be adding 6 firefighters and adding 1 chief officer. So there would be no captains being hired. So just for everybody's clarity.
With the thought that, I guess what I also heard was that then maybe next year, then it goes to the full 4 is sort of a phased in approach. But you're not committing to anything.
And that's the trick is the only way we commit to that is to do option A now. And staffing will take a little bit of time, but I think there's no shortage of need for the dollars. That's my only hesitation, is that I don't know that we have the ability to lock in that it's this year and an additional increase next year. But I would see that as being a job half done.
We haven't asked leadership what they think of Plan B.5.
I'll speak to it just a little bit because it's something it was in our conversations when we brought forth this plan of doing something along those lines. To us, and the reason option B came out is that the captains are a higher priority than the chief officer. So the chief officer gives us some of those capabilities that Commissioner Reed mentioned, as far as some additional programming, some added capacity to manage pre-plans and community risk reduction things the captains give us a direct on-shift 24/7 supervision of each shift. Additionally, those 3 captains will take on additional programmatic coverage and management. So fleet, PPE, training, those type of things. So that's why we landed on option B as opposed to a chief officer and 6 firefighters.
I think that's really helpful. I think part of what, well, there's a few things that really do appeal to me about the full ask. One, I think if there's consensus and agreement amongst the commission that the need is obvious and evident, and that a vast majority of conversations with folks in that district and townships, and the city of Lecompton as another entity have been largely positive and understanding of the fact that the need exists. I think it uncomplicates it to just go there now instead of trying to parse it out over multiple years. And I also think that the more fully realized human infrastructure of the department, the captains and the firefighters, for that leadership integration and fuller staffing makes a lot of sense to me. And so when I look at, that's the biggest appeal, I would say, is that the firefighters without the captains don't make sense to me. And I think that your comments highlight that further. And the addition of the chief officer, I think I heard enough in our work session to convince me that is the difference between option A and B being that it tips the hat. I agree with Commissioner Kelly that there's not a big difference between those two options. It's quite a small difference in the grand scheme of things. And so just fully realizing what the department has done a lot of diligent work to determine would shore them up in this coming year, that makes the most practical sense to me.
Because I've received no constituent feedback saying do not go in the direction of bringing it to full. Option A, I would say, yeah, that I am in favor of moving in this direction, especially since we did most recently have that Pizza Hut fire, and I have had multiple individuals reach out to me and be so supportive of how that was handled. And yeah, I've had no one say do not go in this direction. So, and you all do work so collaboratively with all of our fire and medical, to include Palmyra, Wakarusa, Willow Springs, Lawrence, LDCFM. And so I'm in favor of going to the full proposal.
I think nobody I've talked to is questioning the ultimate need. I think they would like to take it over 2 years instead of 1 year.
I think that the option A, the full request, offers a system that works, and anything other than that offers a system that is ramping up to a system that works. So I think the part that gives me some discomfort about the 2 and 2 is not giving enough direction to CFD1 to be able to make planning for, here are the people that are going to be able to move up to captain next year when we get the funding for it. Instead, being able to kind of work through that timeframe. I also recognize that there were 2 other supplemental requests that didn't make it this far. I kind of mentioned at one of our regular meetings that there are other needs that aren't included here. This is the critical need. So a partial for this puts us even further away from being able to kind of save and plan for some of the other needs in terms of stations and equipment and such. So I think I'm at option A.
I'm fine with option A.
I'm going to offer one, I guess, caveat, and it's a little bit of putting my cards on the table for the fuller budget request is I'm interested in having a conversation with this commission about whether or not to do away with the 1% merit pool for the county budget this year. And so if we were to do that, to me, that translates, a similar philosophy translates to the CFD one budget. So which is a very minor line item, all things considered, in the CFD one budget, but so we don't have to, I believe,
4,000.
make that I don't, it actually doesn't-
4,419.
Yes, and it's not a very significant mill levy impact, but that's just a preview as we're going into the next section of our budget discussion, as we go back to the Douglas County budget, to your point, Commissioner Willie, that's a thought I had, so.
This is sort of semi off topic, but in Commissioner Willie's spreadsheet that she gave us on CFD1, you used a 1.5% delinquency rate. We had not used any delinquency rate for CFD1. The actual delinquency rate for CFD1 is 0.32, which is why we used 0. So I just want to explain, if you really want a 1.5% delinquency rate, we need to program it in, but the proposed given to you is a 0 delinquency rate.
That is excellent context, and knowing that the actual delinquency rate has been 0.32 is very helpful in that conversation. We hadn't
talked about
far,
it.
so we'd really only talked countywide in terms of what that delinquency looks like.
Right. So that's what it was prepared with. If you go with option A, I guess.
And then one more clarifying point, as we had this discussion about the sort of breakout of the one-time portion, do we need to, that 130,000 that is reflected separately on the spreadsheet, we need to add that to the line, or it's included?
No, it's included in A.
Included, it's just, okay. It's really throwing me off. It is an extra line on the spreadsheet. That is all. I was with it until I opened the spreadsheet. So sorry. Thank you for bearing with me, everybody.
Thanks. What's reflected in the spreadsheet is the 1.15 million, and it should be the 1.285.
I thought I was just double checking. Yeah. So I have that it should be 1.285239.
That's what I have.
The full option A.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of why I'd love for you to just sort of give us some direction and let us go do the math, and then you will have that. We will update the R&R notice for CFD1 on the agenda, so you'll see what that exact mill amount. This is my caution that I'm going to say about 15,000 times over the next 4 days. Please do not get so married to one number, because we have a lot of math to do to make sure it's accurate.
And the spreadsheet's right. It reflects that. It pulled some of it out for one time, and we rolled that back into full time.
And I just want to check the math.
Excellent.
Got it.
Yeah.
But the main recap being that we have a majority of the commission supporting the full budget request from CFD1. So thank you all for your time and all the work on this.
And I fully recognize where Commissioner Dorsey is coming from. Like, that is a legitimate conversation too. To me, it was either or. So.
Yeah, I think the perspectives will vary person to person, no doubt. Okay, with that, commissioners, we have, I believe that concludes our conversation for CFD1. Unless Sarah and Sean tell us they need to come back with any further questions or thoughts later. Thank you for being here this morning, gentlemen. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time and all your input.
Appreciate you. All right, commissioners, we talked about a number of topics that we would sort of dive into this morning and hear each other's thoughts and perspectives on, maybe have some additional questions for staff on some of these things. in short, I had my notes reflect that after CFD1, and these are in no particular order, just the notes that I jotted down, we are going to have a discussion about revenues, delinquency rate, equipment reserves, conversations around one-time asks, and I kind of jotted down that that was both talking about current requests and also just overall thinking from commissioners about how we consider those or what we consider one-time requests, behavioral health funds, and the buckets of money, what we have in there now, what options we might have for moving other things from the general to there, in addition to the requests that we have before us for 2027. And then a conversation around community partnerships that I sort of largely had as three main topics under that: fund balances, whether or not there's some thought that some agencies have outgrown county funding, and then also agencies with solvency issues. Does that sound like I've sort of recaptured the things that we chatted about yesterday? Any other thoughts that bubbled up for commissioners last night that feel like we need to put on the agenda for this morning? Okay, it's pretty comprehensive, I think. So, like I said, we don't have to go in any particular order. That's just how the notes populated yesterday. But I do have revenues, and maybe that's an easy place to start. And I think revenues and delinquency rates are things that we can sort of talk about back to back. So we got an updated revenue sheet from Sarah yesterday to reflect the changes that had been realized earlier in the week. I'm curious, I didn't have any particular notes about what any commissioners said around revenues, so I don't know if there's any particular questions that maybe haven't been answered yet about that.
And maybe I can provide a little bit of context. So, when I was putting together the proposed budget and thinking about options for you all as commissioners, I thought about kind of two or three different things in terms of where additional funds could be found for the general fund. And, obviously, I've prepared sales tax estimates to the best of my ability. If you all want to change those, you can, but it's sort of, these are my best estimates. So moving on from there, conversation around the delinquency rate is one we've had over the last couple years. And, in full transparency, I will say to publicly what I have said to some commissioners individually about this. Our 3-year average on our delinquency is 1%. This budget has been placed at 2%. If I recommend, I'm looking at Jean here because we've had this conversation. If I recommend 1% and we hit 1.25, you fire me. Because as the professional, I'm supposed to give you the best professional advice. If you all decide to go down to 1, no one fires you. And so
somebody may fire
maybe,
us,
maybe not, so I am comfortable if you wanted to go to 1.5. 1 makes me very uncomfortable. I just think you'd have to understand that. So that is not my best professional recommendation. But I understand why you'd want to go to 1.5, but I want that to be something you all want to do.
What's the difference between 1 and 2 in terms of money?
Well, it's about, it's close to $1 million. It's like $900,000.
One other thing before it leaves my brain specific to revenues is the motor vehicle revenue conversation is, I think, part of that. So
yeah, and then the other piece I was going to say is, a lever that I pulled in this budget was transfers of property tax dollars to the behavioral health fund. To balance this budget, I took $950,000 and pulled it back into the general fund.
I thought you took more than that.
No, it was 952, 108. is what I pulled back into the general. So that is another lever. And really, in my view, those are really your only three levers: motor vehicle, delinquency, and, oh, hello. And the transfer to the behavioral health fund. Oh, I bet Sean left the meeting. Thanks, Sean.
And I had seen that 2% delinquency rate and felt really comfortable bringing it to 1.5, which gains us, 461,000 to potentially look into what other uses we might put for that money. I didn't look at the one, but I also, because we haven't done the full spreadsheet, not sure like how compelling will I find the needs that I really want to fund is that an appropriate place to look for them? And I'm not sure I'm there yet, but at least to the 1.5, I'm comfortable with that. As if the commission so decides and it's not Sarah's recommendation.
I'm comfortable with one.
Yeah, I hear you, Commissioner Dorsey. I would say I take staff's recommendation very strongly, years of experience creating budgets. And I think it's our job to then evaluate that and determine, looking at the numbers. I'm not comfortable with one. It seems like a high level of risk. I hear Commissioner Willie saying 1.5, and I think that may be down the line for me. I want to see, I have some other items that I think may get us some savings in other ways. But I could get there if that's what we need to, but I would rather I'd rather be a little more conservative on this. I'm not quite willing to. I don't think the risk is quite worth it to me.
I tend to agree, Commissioner Kelly. I could get to 1.5, but I would say in the grand context of this budget, I mean, there's not a lot that I'm ready to say yes to anyway, given the full context of the budget. And so it doesn't feel like a need for me to pull from multiple places. I think that and I take staff's recommendation very seriously. And so for, just a filter for me for most of the decisions, for all of the decisions before us is to sway very little from what staff have recommended. And I think that when it comes to revenues in particular, I trust their judgment and expertise much more. I think 1.5% is not a huge jump, but it's also not nothing. It's close to $500,000. And if things go certain directions in our overall economy, that does have impact. And so I don't want to get too comfortable with the fact that we've been coming in under what is a conservative estimate. But I think that's smart, and I don't think that we need it.
I've also found areas for savings, and so I could go down to 1.5, but I'm also interested in where everyone else is landing as far as finding those savings in the budget. So, because I've found savings as well, so interested in more conversations.
I'm glad for the conversation. I think the 1.5 is a big change for us, and I think I'm comfortable if it's our decision to give that a try.
Understood. I think it's something that, in my opinion, we don't have to land on that today, but having everybody's thoughts and knowing, especially once we get through the spreadsheet and the line items early next week, that is a line that we revisit and determine if we want to recalculate that outside what staff's recommendation is.
And there are lots of numbers between 1.5 and 1.
That's true.
A 1.25% delinquency net about 693,000.
Okay. What about motor vehicle fees are commissioners thinking? You know, we had some more discussion about that yesterday and got reiterated to us that the treasurer is recommending 5 and thinks that that's good and smart for now. We have the ability to go up but we also understand that there are may not be some long-term realization of revenues there. So curious to hear if any commissioners have an appetite for wanting to increase past the $5 that we previously discussed.
I'd be willing to go to 10, except for the fact that it expires in a couple of years. So we might get used to that money and then it dries up. I don't think it will, because I think Johnson County wants the 10 and they're going to want to keep it, and they will lobby for it.
And I'm worried about the impact on individuals for the additional cost, and worried that when we do get to the expiration date, the sunset, that it will go into effect at 10, if not more, because individuals will lobby for it to be 10, if not more. So I think I would be more interested in graduated, because we can increase it depending on the feedback that we receive. So more interested in potential like 6 to 7.
Well, the feedback I've heard is nobody wants the fee raised at all, but nobody wants their property taxes raised either. And you probably have a few property owners without vehicles, and then you have a lot of non-property owners with vehicles. So pick your poison.
I think it's good to have the delinquency rate discussion and this discussion back to back, because both in my mind are a little bit about how much risk you want to take when you're thinking long term. Commissioner Dorsey, you may be right. Johnson County may force it, or use their weight behind it. I will also say that they've tried in years past and it hasn't gone through. So this wasn't an easy move. And I think the fact that they put such a short timeline on it tells us something. And I don't want to extend too far. Again, like the delinquency rate, I'm really interested in seeing what other levers, Sarah talked about our transfer of behavioral health. Is that a lever we want to pull a little more? There may be risk in pulling that lever as well, because we may look at a new PPS rate, or we may not get the same funding from KDADs. So I think that's really our role here, is to determine what level, as we think about the future of Douglas County and the people who live here, which lever do we feel most confident pulling? I'm with Commissioner Anderson on this. If we needed to go $1 more up, I could probably do that. But, it was 3 for some people, and now it's 5 for all. So that seems like a big impact to me that will be felt by people who haven't had to pay it before. And I'd like to make little baby steps if we can.
I have not been excited about the conversation moving beyond 5. I feel like it's already been a big change for customers at motor vehicle. And that was a decision that can be made by the treasurer and without us. And so there's other points of conversation for that. I just, in terms of the levers we're pulling, that one didn't seem like one I was particularly interested in, but I also hadn't heard from others.
Yeah, I personally don't I don't think it's worth the current get or the potential risk to go above 5 at this point. I agree with fellow commissioners who have commented that going from 3 to 5 and $5 for everyone, no matter how you do the transaction, and then $5 per transaction, not $5 per visit to your treasurer's office to do a bunch of transactions, that's a compounding effect, and it will realize us more revenues already. And I think that we pay attention to that, and it's a conversation we'll continue to revisit. And before we know it, in 2029 we'll be here, and we'll kind of have a better sense of where legislation is at, and if it's going to be a more long-term option for counties to do that, then and I'm not opposed to the fact that we might incrementally and gradually change that over the next few years. But I think that the jump from 3 to 5 and the 5 per transaction right now is significant enough, and there's monies to be realized. So I'm not interested in adjusting that any further right now.
2 at 5, 2 at 6 or 7, and 1 at 10.
Well, I think I heard
I
Commissioner
heard-
Kersey say
Yeah.
you would support 10 if it weren't going to sunset, because therein lies the risk. If we could do that and realize that that will it evens things out between property tax owners and vehicle owners to some degree and makes it more right-sized, but the risk is too significant because we might just be reabsorbing those costs in less than 5 years. So I think we have consensus.
Yeah, I
that
think we're at 5
are at 5,
right
right?
now. I mean,
Yeah.
I think as we
I think we're at
as we sort of firm up our revenues, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other revenues specific?
Yeah, I
thought?
got a question about sales tax. Is the proposal may be out there, but I thought at one point there was a star bond recommendation that would include Costco in the area, which would then mean we wouldn't get any sales tax from Costco.
Correct. Which is why I'm flat. Because I think it's too soon to tell really what the impact of that will be. First of all, that Star Bond District would have to pass. They would
Do we
absorb.
vote on that?
We do. I don't know when it's coming to you yet. But you would vote on it for the way it's currently structured. You'll vote on it. And yeah.
One I dabbled in and then pulled back, and I thought it's kind of above my pay grade to start second guessing what's going into those calculations for the sales tax. So I stayed at it's 1% up for behavioral health quarter cent and 0.04 down for the countywide. So I stayed there.
Any other thoughts or questions about sales tax revenues? Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
On the behavioral health sales tax transfer, I really feel like, so there's a couple options there, but partially I also think this is a conversation you're going to want to have around other things first, and then come back to it. You can do one of two, or you can do both things. You can move more things. There's a few projects that we have identified that are in the general fund that could move to the behavioral health fund, or you could also reduce the amount of the transfer. So I think both of those are options to create room in the general fund and put more on the behavioral health fund. As we stated during the overview, we believe we've got about capacity for about 2.1 million in ongoing in the behavioral health fund. So I would just keep that in mind as you're thinking about things you want to add in the behavioral health fund and or reduction of the transfer. Does that make sense, commissioners? I want to make sure that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And just to get clear, we've had 4 different things that are currently funded in the general fund that have been identified as possible to move to the behavioral health fund. So I think for us commissioners, it leads into, and maybe now is a good time to just talk about the behavioral health projects at large, and what's currently funded in there. We moved a number of things there last year and decided not to move other things, which remain in the general fund. So the community shelter, housing authority, tenants to homeowners, and then the permanent supportive housing assistance, which my math has as a total of, if all four of those moved, $817,032, which is a little less than what the transfer amount was that Sarah and her team have budgeted for that. So just to be clear, we're sort of talking about an either or option or both and.
I already took the 952. That's
Yep.
already, I reduced that amount of the transfer to balance.
All right. So then I guess we have the option to
Go further.
go further and add more to that transfer, or to move these projects in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear. I will say I'm interested in the continuity that I think exists when we really have all of the supportive housing and mental health and substance use projects and programs and services under the behavioral health bucket. It's like I've liked that direction that we have been moving with recent years. I think that there's, to Sarah's point earlier, certainly there's risk for us to consider about the capacity of that fund and some potential threats or risks to changes in funding for some of those entities in the future. But we do have, I think, some comfortable capacity right now, and I'm interested in having as much continuity as possible about the community partners and the programs and services that are funded through those dollars. It feels more concentrated and less disjointed to me to go that direction.
I would say staff has found having the permanent supportive housing project in the general fund really complicated to make work. So if you wanted a staff perspective of something that would, because the rest of the flexible housing pool and the permanent and that all lives in the behavioral health fund. So to me, if we moved the 321 032, that would create some simplicity for staff. But we'll do whatever the commission wants us to do.
That's helpful. Thank you. I was going to ask a follow-up, like I personally have an interest in those four line items moving. If there's not appetite for that amongst a majority of the commission and we sort of cherry pick them, I wanted to understand what staff's priority is. And that sounds like that's top priority because it would uncomplicate things for you. The other ones are just sort of up to us. It's all up to us, but
I guess that was my question is, it makes mental sense to me to move those and have those be in behavioral fund, but that's a different question. That's more of a management decision, which I would ask for staff's input as opposed to, is that the amount of money that I want or amount of expense that I want moved from general to behavioral? Because I'm not sure yet. So would that be, reducing the reduction of the 952, offsetting that reduction to move the projects over? It's just an either or.
No, this is in addition to.
Yeah.
So, to balance, I moved 952. So this would be 952 plus 817. Yeah.
I didn't make that move yet. And still, because I hadn't looked through all the options about what I'm hoping to see funded. It makes me a little nervous having made a big transfer already out of that, because we've had that discussion off and on, and I've generally been supportive of having the behavioral health items fall under that sales tax more so than on the general. But I haven't made a commitment in my mind one way or the other about the 817,000 in expense.
And really those four projects were identified not because of the dollar amounts, just simply because of their continuity to the behavioral health fund. We looked at every community partner from the definitions that we put forward and brought forward to the commission earlier this year. Those are the only four remaining community partners that are eligible under their current under the current service agreement funding structure.
I appreciate you putting a point on that, Sarah. And I think for me, that's the whole point of my interest in it. Yes, I mean, it's moving, it's moving things around in a way that changes capacity here and there, but that achieving continuity and a sense of I just think it'll help us as commissioners in the future budget years too, make these conversations a little bit simpler on ourselves, to be thinking about what is funded to community partners out of the general fund, that is separate and apart from all of the things closely tied to our goals and initiatives around behavioral health, in all of its myriad of ways. So I think there's a real cleanness to that for me. So I have a real interest in moving all four of those and want to know if there's any commissioners who are uncomfortable with that idea, who have concerns about what that means for the fund balances that we have in behavioral health.
I'm not concerned about, we have capacity in that behavioral health fund. I really want to be cautious about overdoing it because I do worry about, as I mentioned before, the PPS rate increasing or KDAD's, change of tune. So I want to give us a little room, but I feel like those four things seem better organized in our behavioral health supports. And so I'm comfortable moving them over.
Yeah, I think the continuity is really helpful.
Any big concerns or objections to that direction, Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Dorsey?
I'm comfortable moving them over, but I did make some cuts to those particular areas. So, I mean, we can move them over, but I would like to discuss each of those projects individually. So, but yeah, I'm comfortable moving the group, the bucket, I would say, over, and then just discussing the projects.
Okay, yep, that sounds good. Commissioner Dorsey, you have any thoughts to share? Okay.
We'll right now plan to move those four community partners at a total of 81732 over. In addition to the reduction in the transfer that we made in the proposed budget, this is a 33% reduction in the transfer to the behavioral health fund from the general fund.
Which leaves us a balance of what?
This is just the transfer, so it's not the total revenue. $3,653,550. It's what I have that transfer at, but the brain trust behind me will make sure my math's right.
That's the transfer after we've already reduced it, the 9.52? Or is that the transfer from which you reduced the, 950?
So the
5 to 3.
Yeah. So the transfer for the 26 reestimate, so your current year was 5,422,690. I took 952,108 to balance. If you move the remaining 817, that's a $1,769,140 reduction to the transfer, which gets your new transfer rate at $3,653,550. This is where I'm really glad I learned how to speak numbers fully out in like elementary math class. It's become very helpful for me in my future career. So plan for that for now and see how the rest of the discussions go.
Other thoughts about I guess just the behavioral health balances? Sarah, you said you're gonna make sure that that math gets correct, right? Can we get a updated note later today that will have just those totals?
What the exact transfer amount
Mhm.
is. Yeah, I think we can get that for you. Okay.
It would just be helpful to reference back because I don't write down numbers that fast, big numbers that fast. There will be an error, and then it might change later. Okay, commissioners, do we think this is a good opportunity to stay on behavioral health topic, and maybe we can have some discussion about the current requests that we have before us, or any other thoughts commissioners have about I mean, I don't know that since we don't have our spreadsheets to staff yet, and I know we all have some thinking to do. I don't know if it makes sense to go through every single potential behavioral health project option we have, but I'm curious if there are any um, big thoughts or ideas or concerns to bring up right now.
I had one, it's not behavioral health related, but it's something that you mentioned earlier in our conversation about the 1% merit pool.
Mm.
And that would affect all the
Yeah.
other
Okay.
departments and such. Is that something you want to
Yeah,
expand
yeah,
on?
let's talk about that. So for me, based on the discussion that we had yesterday, it was really helpful and useful to me to understand that number is effectively arbitrary. And so I really like that Douglas County has a strong benefits package for their employees. And I don't believe that the 1% merit is very reflective of that. I think being able to maintain the market and have the longevity and all of the other benefits remain intact. The 1% merit pool, I mean, maybe if it's arbitrary, it can be argued in both ways, but it almost seems better to me to remove that from this budget and take that decision making and process away from departments for the year, because there is not much differentiation to be made between employees and the departments. I don't know I mean, it's an out there idea, perhaps. I don't know that it's a very popular one. And I don't want to send the message that I undervalue employees across the county at all. I'm just not sure that 1% is meaningful. And so I identified it as an area to reduce what the proposed budget is, and that's about the only real thing recommended by staff that I personally decided to cut.
This is a decision of the commission. I just want to make sure, I feel like my sales pitch yesterday was really bad, and that was not my intent by saying it didn't have impact. So on behalf of all county employees, I want to say, I'm sorry if my sales pitch was bad. Obviously any increase to pay helps keep us market competitive, and that is important. So I don't want to make it sound like it's worthless, because it's not.
Understood. And we also heard, we heard from HR professionals that that 3% is really the ideal space to have a merit pool, for it to be meaningful and to really be about merit. And so that is compelling to me.
Can I give my speech on salaries? Last year, we gave a total of 6.6%. The little research paper you gave me says on average, the total for market and merit and everything combined was about 3.7. The projection for next year is about the same. So in my view, we gave too much last year, and I would almost prefer to flip and give a bigger merit and less market. Let's pay for good performance and not for just showing up.
Sarah, can you clarify the brief list that we had of the market comparisons for different categories of work? Was that market and merit, or was that strictly a market rate? compare.
Every organization does it differently. So I don't have, all of those organizations' pay structures and charts. So some people just give like a 1% COLA and then a 3 or 4% merit pool. We don't do that. So it would be hard for me to tell. What I would say is that it appeared that most pay was going up somewhere between 3 and 5, from what I could see on that very brief review. And I would say, in terms of that analysis, that I don't know that it's quite I don't know that I share Commissioner Dorsey's interpretation of what we did last year. Those numbers look at like all types of pay, and so it isn't, I would argue with the characterization that we overpaid employees.
I also picked out this line item to play with, and kind of thinking that like if we can't add to it and make it a larger pool, then should we eliminate that and use it to cover employment related things that are also in our supplementals. And one of the things that I played with, let me take the average market rate, the market rate from 3.4 to 3.8 across the board, and I used the other 0.6 that wasn't added to that to fund some other things. So that's even more muddy in the waters. Yeah, so I took the 1% merit rate is an option at 293,000. And I was looking at covering two things that were in our proposal as not yet funded, and that still left about a 0.4 rather than having an even smaller merit pool, just adding that onto across the board, which the suspicion was that with a 1% merit pool that that's what department heads might be doing anyway, is just spreading it out, and then that just allowed us to do that up front.
This seems like another lever we can pull, but it's fairly low on my list to pull. Partially because I think if we eliminate merit pool altogether, we're sort of sending a message about performance. And I'm really grateful for the work that our Douglas County employees do. I think if we start to step back in our from that 3.5, I think we'll get behind really quickly, because then in future years you can continue to have to make it up to get back to market rate. I think it's something we could look at. I think Commissioner Reed, I had a similar reaction when I heard it yesterday. Did sort of check in with staff to say, did I understand that correctly? And I think if I feel like it's a lever that needs to be pulled as we get to all the things we want, but I have other things that I think will get us where we need to be without eliminating merit pool.
And the other direction to go with it is, as we've looked at freeing up funds possibly through the delinquency rate, does that get added to it and have a larger merit pool? Because it was based on what we could afford in the budget, not any external things. So I'm just putting all the options on the table.
That's a good point, Commissioner Willie. Commissioner Anderson, you have any thoughts?
Thinking back to last year, we did give a rather hefty market and merit, and more than I'm used to as well. And so I'm more aligned with Commissioner Dorsey in that we gave a couple of years of market and merit. And so I would be more aligned with staying at the 1% and adjusting our 3.4% average market raise by job family. I don't know what that would really look like if we were to adjust that particular line item. But that's also a fairly high average as well. But I think that's also an average across all job families too. So I'm not sure what it would look like to adjust that across all job families. But that's also a rather large pool, being 1,184,000. But I think there is some wiggle room within both of those line items. I'm not interested in adjusting salary increase based on tenure because I think it is important to ensure that when we have individuals that are loyal and that are sticking around, that we do value loyalty. I do think that most employees do know that merit has a tendency to come and go, and it does change from year to year based on the economy and how things are going. And so that's not a given. And also average market is not a given. So I do hope that employees understand that it's always going to be a fluctuation from year to year. And some years you might also have freezes, whether it be role freezes or merit and market freezes. So every year is a little bit different.
In my head, I kept the market rate and the longevity, and I didn't touch those. The only one that I kind of in my head was playing with or would be interested in looking at playing with was the 1% merit.
Okay. I think I have a couple thoughts. I want to ensure that I hear majority of the commission is not interested in adjusting the market rate at all currently, but I think that maybe there is some possibility that at a later date, later in the year, that we have some more information from staff about market and merit. I mean, it's come up from a couple of commissioners a number of times, and I think that, if there's better understanding about how the market and merit pool works, perhaps that's helpful. I'm not hearing from a majority of the commission that there's interest in adjusting that 3.4 market. There's some possibility that we would adjust or change the 1% merit in one way or another when we get towards the end of our deliberations.
And I think the general consensus was the potential of lowering it or eliminating it, not adding to it. So maybe that's just worth just making sure that that's
Clarifying.
what range of things commissioners are considering.
Me either.
Yeah, no, I would be interested in adjusting the 3.4% average market raise by job family, lowering.
I'm just not sure that I heard that from a majority of the commission is my point.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. I'm not sure what
Then
others said.
Commissioner Dorsey say he wants to swap market for merit.
Correct.
Well, yeah.
And then I heard Karen wants to add to market. And then I heard Patrick say he was fine with where it was. And Shannon to say, so I don't think we have consensus.
There was a lot of discussion. I think that there are 3 commissioners who have no interest in lowering or touching the 3.4% market rate. I think the 1% merit pool is maybe a topic we could revisit later in our deliberations, but that there's not consensus on right now.
So who are the 3 commissioners that want to keep the 3.4?
I believe I heard myself and Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Willie state that, but if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, I'm wondering that we're getting close to 10:30. I could personally use a break if that's okay. And I think that we might be at a good pause point. We can pick up the other topics for discussion in 5 minutes. Come back at 10:27. Okay, thanks, commissioners.
Got waterways, I got a little bell. Right.
All right, commissioners, I heard the recording in progress a few moments ago, so we're good to go. I should have taken a 10-minute break. We did naturally, and that's okay. So we are back at the table, and looking back at the list of topics we discussed earlier, I think I have a suggestion that maybe further, now that we've made some decisions about transfers to the behavioral health fund of some projects from general fund, I might suggest that we leave the discussion about behavioral health projects otherwise to start on Monday along with all of the other requests. I worry that we delve down there and we will get stuck in that wormhole for the rest of the day. And I think we have some other big topics. So equipment reserves was something that is maybe the lower hanging fruit that we could have some discussion about, and then one-time ask discussion and community partner topics that were highlighted earlier. So Commissioner Willie, equipment reserves was your request. So what you thinking?
So of course, none of this would be of help to a mill levy conversation. It really only works for one-time things. For the most part, I think it's kind of our job maybe to have more robust conversations with our departments about what we want to see in those, because some of them are really clear and some of them, they have clear ideas that they're able to communicate, but we don't get that in writing. The only one that I'm pretty sure is available for other things would be, for some reason, we have a commissioner's line at 17,000. And it feels like, is that something we've ever used or we would need? We don't have a lot of capital needs.
Yeah, so when I look at this list of equipment reserve balances, the commissioner's line and the economic, I can explain where the economic and development initiatives came from. Those two are the ones that don't really have a clear spending plan in front of them. The economic development initiatives was developed way back under Commissioner Gahn. We had some funding in the general fund that was available for incentives. And when it wasn't spent each year, the balance of that was transferred to this line item. So that's where that 421,000 came from. And there's a clear path. Statutes outline how you can use the equipment reserve fund. If you decide you do not want it for this purpose, it has to go back to the general fund and it has to be either then reallocated. I can't change it inside this pool. It has to go back and then it would have to be reallocated for another purpose. So just want to be clear about that. It will look like a transfers. Any accommodation of this would be a transfers out of equipment reserve back and transfer into the general fund.
I don't see any need to keep it in equipment reserve.
Yeah, it's just been one of those ones I've never gotten around to. Yeah.
But can it be used for economic development initiatives out of the equipment reserve?
It could.
Okay, that's what I was kind of wondering.
So like say you wanted to fund something that you felt was economic development one time, it would be an excellent use of that.
Okay, that's what I was kind of curious about.
Well,
then
we get in.
Baldwin
Then we get
childcare
into
project.
Yeah, okay.
definitions of what's economic development.
I think as long as I can tie it to what that is, I can get it past the auditors.
Well, couldn't you just transfer it twice?
You could do that too. We can make it either way.
But you don't have to transfer if you fund it as a
Economic
one-time.
development.
Right,
Right.
okay. So you don't even have to bother transferring it.
Nope.
Okay.
Well, I want to make sure, I think I also heard you ask a question, Commissioner Willie, about the commissioner's line, which is a much smaller number than the economic development line we were just highlighting. Do you have any light to shed on that, Sarah, and what, and examples of, I mean, it's a small number, but.
I mean, that one was here when I got here.
Got it.
Okay. And so I don't know what it hasn't really been used for
Okay.
anything. I bet at one point in time it paid for commissioner chairs. But in the future, if you want new chairs, we can find another place to pay for chairs.
Okay. Are there any other specific lines on the equipment reserves folks have questions about?
Those are probably the two that were top of mind for me. The commissioners one, are we able to just sweep it and close that? Or
Yes.
do you feel like there's a need to keep it open for some future? Okay. All right. And so the economic development one, I think maybe if we kind of have it on our radar as we kind of process requests and maybe future requests, that I don't know that it needs to have anything done with it.
I've spent that money about 10 times.
I'm sorry?
That 400 and some odd thousand.
21,000.
Yeah, like Commissioner Dorsey, I have an idea for something with that. So I'm planning to sweep it in my budget spreadsheet.
Commissioner, since not that it impacts the specific projects that we have for consideration now, but do we have support of the commission for sweeping the 17,500 plus in the commissioner's line and eliminating that fund on this list and just sweeping that back into general for future budget years? I'm seeing some affirmative head nods. I just want to make sure that we don't have any concerns about it.
Well, for future budget years or for 27?
It'll
Well,
just go to fund balance.
Yeah, sorry. It'll go to fund balance and therefore be available for, yep. Sorry for misspeaking. I'm getting myself a little discombobulated.
And I'll say we'll probably do this in 26 reestimate.
Okay,
I'll probably just do it this year.
got it.
So I know I didn't hear other commissioners asking our elected officials and our department heads about wanting more information about these. Is that something that is really just me and I should drop it? Or is that something that we feel is a fair ask to get some more information from? It won't happen probably in time to be helpful for this budget conversation, but I think moving forward, I think that would be a smart thing.
What's the question?
So do you know how for like equipment for Public Works in here, you have a detailed list of what they're spending their you have,
Oh, yeah, I would think,
that's the only department you have this for. You do not have it for the sheriff or IT.
I would think that would be helpful.
Okay, so it's not just me and we can have those conversations. Thank you.
That was what I was going to suggest, is that once we're done with budget, let's develop some guidance for departments on how they're using, how they intend to use equipment reserve and what are the expectations coming to us. So we can make adjustments to those lines if we need to, of what's the percentage that goes to equipment reserve year after year. Some departments have a much higher need, others don't. I want to be cautious of something that requires some departments, some of the numbers on here, GIS is $6,000, I just want to be really thoughtful about it. And I think it's going to take time outside of the budget discussion.
Absolutely. I don't think we can solve that now, but I'm glad to hear that other commissioners come on board.
Yeah, I wonder if, I look at many of these and, I appreciated the questions, Commissioner, really, because it did bring up some interesting things. Like I didn't know that about the Register of Deeds, that specific technology fund and how it has to be used and whatnot, and that it can be used elsewhere. So I think good explanation, more thorough picture from administration, sort of at the top of everything, that explains like any special statutory requirements specific to any of those funds, and then the uniqueness of certain departments and how that might matter, that you might be able to summarize for some of these smaller funds without making it a big lift for every department. But then the bigger ones, like the sheriff's office, might be able to give us a lot more breakdown and detail, similar to what Public Works has as the two examples of big ones.
Departments that have vehicles, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And you have to plan for that because I don't want emergency vehicle replacements to be coming to us or outside of budget. This is a perfect place for that. So it's just some of the others that were not vehicle heavy that I had.
I have a question about the equipment reserve for the sheriff's department. Is that his money or is that county money?
Yes,
It's taxpayer money.
it's taxpayer money.
No, but what I'm saying is,
Well,
does he
discretion-
control that?
He has discretion to spend out of those line items per our finance policy. So, he's follows our finance policy. So if it's over $50,000, he runs that purchase past me.
Oh, okay.
And then if it were over 100, he would come to the commission for that award out of there.
Gotcha. So it's not like his normal operating budget where once we approve it,
Right.
he can kind of do what he wants.
But I would say the sheriff follows our finance policies very closely. As well, do all other elected officials. I want to state that on the record.
Since you know they're all listening.
Already in trouble about merit, so.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I think I'll be interested to learn more about equipment reserves in the future, and glad we got a little bit of clarity about that. All right, how about some discussion about one-time asks? Did you have anything more, Commissioner Riley, about equipment
A
reserves?
couple of commissioners had mentioned kind of other levers on the revenue type side. Are there things that we haven't hit yet that we should?
You want clarity, Commissioner Dorsey?
Well, I don't even know if you call this revenue, but you know, we had a big discussion about fund balance months ago, I guess. And a proposal was put forward. We couldn't reach any kind of consensus on what the percentage should be. At some point, we're probably going to have to talk about that again.
Well, and this budget pegs the general fund back to 20%, which we have the capacity to go to 20% with it.
It's currently sitting at 22.
Yes.
The general fund's currently sitting at 22.
But within our kind of conversations over next week, we've got, if we choose to, we can go down to 20% in there. And
You could go down to 10% if you wanted to. That's what I
really
want to
don't want
clarify.
to.
Yeah,
I don't.
that's what I want to clarify.
I guess for my point, I don't want to go below 20% in the general fund.
My recollection, Commissioner Dorsey, of that conversation was that we asked for staff to bring us a more comprehensive finance policy review, and that will be coming with all the different new finance policies, and that will be part of it.
That was my
Yeah.
recollection.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right. So one-time asks, Commissioner Kelly, you brought this up a little bit yesterday, so I don't know if there's any particular framing that you want to do, but the notes I had sort of indicated that perhaps there's a little bit of discussion we could have about what was characterized as a one-time ask in the list of options that we have before us this year. And then more philosophically, how are we thinking about that versus ongoing? Is there really ongoing costs?
I heard Commissioner Dorsey say that there was an ongoing that he wanted to change into a one-time. And so I just know we've had a lot of discussion about what that means. And then I heard earlier Sarah sort of say we could talk about like how much we have available for one time. And so those are just some topics that and Commissioner Dorsey, if it's better to wait till we see the individual lines of the budget, I don't want to interrogate one certain one, but
the specific item I was thinking about was the Boys and Girls Club. They're trying to adjust to losing funding. I think their request was for ongoing. I might consider it as a one-time transition type help.
Yeah, I think we owe it to community partners as they build their budgets. If they're telling us that they would like to count on this money year after year after year, and obviously we could reduce their budget or eliminate their budget altogether. If that's their request, I want to honor that request rather than tell them, hey, in short term, we'll do this for a year, because to me, all funding is actually 1 year at a time. It's Kansas, that's what we're required to do. But as they think about their budgets, I want them to tell us whether this is going to be one time or ongoing. And I don't think it's being a good partner to say, well, I know you want to have this money forever, but I'm just giving it to you now and telling you that's the way it's going to be. I think it's a partnership. It's a conversation.
And I think I'm more open and more flexible for if we further have a conversation or things that we've learned or things that they've learned since March when they put in the request. It's not a tool I want to take off the table. I think we have to be sensitive about it if we use it.
I would say I get cautious when somebody, if they said it's for staffing and they say it's one time, they're going to be back next year and ask you for more. So I just think it's also important to just recognize that, because for example, headquarters has requested for the last 2 years, they're saying it's one time, but they keep coming back and asking you for it. So is it really, when does it become, when is it really one time and when is it just, well, I have to come back through the budget process every year anyway. So whatever makes it easiest to get funded, I'm going to do. That's part of my concern.
I think my question around this topic is mostly just to be clear, and I know we've talked about it here and there, but I think it would be helpful to hear from staff just to summarize for us where those one-time dollars, whatever we might say yes to that is asked for as a one-time request this year, just summarize for us where, we talked about the cash basis line, but are there other places to be considering that?
So I think are you asking where would we pay for it out of? Yeah, it would come out of that on your spreadsheet, out of that cash basis reserve number. And that's where we've placed those budget options. And I would say that, staff funded some one-time requests and those came out of the funds that we had left over at the end of 25. 2 million of that went to the employee benefits fund to bolster its fund balance. 1.25 is a transfer to equipment reserve to fund the one-time costs associated with the new financial HR business system that's coming online. 300,000 for the comprehensive zoning update was funded one time on that list. $150,000 for SRC vans was funded one time in the proposed budget. I think somebody behind me tell me if I missed anything else in the general fund that was one time that I funded. I think that is, tenant eviction defense program for 2027 was funded one time. And that's it in the that is it in the general. I would say other general fund one-time expenses that are eligible would be the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area Capital Improvement Projects, the Collections Management Assistant. Those would be appropriate for the general fund.
And then we have a number of one-time requests that are behavioral health specific, and that we have notes that they're eligible for that or potentially for MFAF or special alcohol and a couple of those.
Yeah, the Baldwin Economic Development Corporation project would be general fund as well. I think that's it. I think that is it for the general fund. One-time allowable expenses.
Any other thoughts to share about one-time, I guess, requests in general? I'll share that I agree with Commissioner Kelly that it is important when a partner, I take pretty seriously when a partner asks for this or that, ongoing or one time, that if I'm thinking about saying yes to them, I'm thinking about saying yes to the request as is. I'm thinking a lot less about adjusting that request. I'm not saying that I'm never thinking about it. We have in this room certainly negotiated some partner requests and made changes. And I think to Commissioner Willie's point that, we do reserve the right and the authority to do that ultimately, but it is something that I am cautious about and really choose to believe and respect that the request given is a request for what the need is, and if we can't meet the need as asked for, then the best next answer is no, sorry, not right now, or just no, sorry. And so that's really a lens that I look at these through. I'm not ever thinking about whether or not to make something ongoing one time, or vice versa, if that were a thing. I'm mostly just trying to determine if there are one-time things that are obvious one time, there won't be another ask for exactly that behind it. If that seems obvious for things like, purchasing property, purchasing equipment, things like that are true capital outlay, then I'm mostly just trying to filter for where can that come from? Are there any other places that those dollars might be able to be spent? For example, some discussion around that economic development initiatives, equipment reserve, and that might be a place where some things fit. So I'm filtering for those things. If there's places elsewhere in the budget to pull dollars that we know we're not going to get asked for again for that exact same thing, that's how I'm filtering those things. Any other thoughts to share?
I'm open to, even though proposals are either submitted as one time or ongoing, depending on the requests or how we are reviewing the budget, I'm open to reconsidering those requests, especially after hearing from community partners and departments. So I'm not stuck or just beholden to the request itself. So I'm open to being flexible as the process continues, and hearing from fellow commissioners and all the stakeholders at the table. So I'm not, if it's ongoing or one time, I'm open to moving it around.
Okay. Well, let's keep talking about community partners and our relationships to them. And I think, to me, the theme maybe of this part of the conversation, and I guess thoughts and questions raised by commissioners yesterday around fund balances, solvency, whether or not identifying if there's a true need for county dollars, or if there's alignment with county initiatives and values. I just think that there's a little bit of unpacking for us to do, and some management expectation or management setting, expectation setting and management. Thank you, everybody, for being patient with my words today. That I'm hoping that a discussion amongst us can be helpful for staff as they continue work with community partners, and move into soon enough talking about 2028 budget, and managing some expectations around what those asks coming to the commission are. So that's sort of how I'm thinking about things. I think that the fund balance conversation in particular is one that we have had a little bit of, or a lot of, in one way or another, every summer this time of year during our budget hearings. And it continues to be difficult to, I think, figure out a one size fits all approach, perhaps. But I'm interested in if we feel like we can get some consensus among commissioners around what the expectation is for community partner, and the what their fund balance sort of says about the health of their organization, and the need for funds from us, especially when being asked for supplemental funds.
I'd start with, this is a line I always look at, and try and ask them also, and not just make the assumption that their idea of available fund balance is the same as ours. That, these organizations, it's a struggle for them to fit into the budget form that we give them, and sometimes there's some interpretation. Okay, always there's some interpretation on our part that goes into what did they mean by that. In general, we're a government agency, like the 20% to 25% of fund balance and operations is 2.4 to 3 months. Our funding source is fairly reliable, and so that is, I wouldn't want to go lower than that, but that's a reasonable thing. For nonprofits, I ballpark for nonprofits that I've consulted with in the past, 3 to 6 months, with probably closer to 3 months of that if they have really diversified funding, and 6 months or beyond if they have like a single funding source or only a few funding sources, because that's more risk. So it's kind of weighing who are they as an organization and what's the risk that they're exposed to. So I really don't start flagging anything until we're getting closer to that 9 to 12 months, or 100% or 100% plus of their fund balance, of their operating expenses to fund balance. And at some point, I think, especially some that we're funding it at a pretty low level, like I think it's okay. I consider these, year to year, we do not have an ongoing obligation, even if we kind of say that we have ongoing intentions there. Like, it's okay to reevaluate that every year. And some of our, I think, our organizations have kind of grown past the need to have us, and just becomes, does the commission feel the value of having them come to the table with these other partner groups at budget time? Is there a value there of keeping them on for 10 or 20,000? So that's a lot of thoughts.
I appreciate those thoughts, and I think, I mean, certainly anything getting close to a year of operating in reserves is what I will really flag, and stands out to me. It makes me question things. As far as the notion that there are some organizations that may not need our funding anymore, I tend to agree. I think that it's always gets to a bit of an awkward timing of things to figure that out sort of in real time and in live time of doing these budget hearings, and to consider that there are some organizations that maybe we don't need to be funding anymore, or that we should be considering a reduction to, based on how their financial picture looks otherwise. I get more comfortable with the idea of just saying, eliminating a line item, eliminating a community partner budget, versus I never quite know where to make a reduction when it comes to the idea that maybe we just reduce what it is, but they still remain a partner. For me personally, anytime I've had those thoughts over the years, I get a little stuck in that math and just kind of back out to the yes or no to the request, and simplify it for me in that way. So that's just a part of my process that has become evident to me. And to figure out an alternative idea is where I get stuck personally.
So I have a hard time with a hard and fast rule, and that's why I like to ask them what their purposes are. Because if an organization has either a large funder or an unstable funder, and they're planning ahead for that, I want to value that, and I don't want them to take a hit for it, because that's good sound planning. And sometimes they will mix capital projects that they're saving for into that operational analysis, and I want to make sure that we're pulling that out. Like, if those funds aren't available for operations, then it doesn't kind of fit that. How many months worth of operating does this represent?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Willie, and that's why I really think it's key that it says unrestricted there, because if it was attached to a capital project, it would be restricted, ideally. Yeah, and I think that's why
it would report that way.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to ask that question: is this truly unrestricted funds? I think our conversation with KUIP was really well timed on Wednesday, because I think there are organizations that have become mature enough that, maybe historically we have funded them. And we need to think about, as they've become mature in this way, they have this sort of fund basis, that we need to start thinking about how to pull back from a reliance on county funding. That said, I do think that some of the partners rely on county funding for leveraging other funds, and I think that's really important to be thinking about. I also think, and I hadn't thought about it much until you mentioned it, Commissioner Willie, like keeping them involved in the system is sometimes a good way of doing it. But at some of the levels that we're being asked for to keep them involved in the system, I just don't see it, right? If we're 50% is high number to me, for a 6 month or, 6 months of that. Those that are way over that, I think that is a red flag for me. So I just want to be upfront with those partners that it's not that we disrespect the work that they do. It's just that we think they've matured to such a space that, taxpayer dollars might not be the thing that's keeping them going here. And and in a lot of cases, it doesn't look like it is. Yeah.
I think that match conversation is one that we probably haven't adequately had with our organizations. Some of them volunteer that information, how they leverage local dollars. And so we, had started even a local, very small match for companies that would come in and provide rural broadband. We haven't had any asks for that for quite a while, but it's small amount, but it should leverage into other dollars elsewhere. So I think that's a really good point to bring up, that we haven't been asking that. We don't fully know.
And I think the challenge we run into as well is that we have some community partners that don't fully provide visibility to their unrestricted fund balance or to their budget detail overall. Because as I'm looking through, we have several that are do a really good job. Heartland Radak, and we have I think Just Food also does a really good job of breaking out their budget detail, and then we have others that mirror. All I see is I don't see a whole lot on here. So I believe they probably have a lot more because they have locations all over. And I'm seeing an ending fund balance of $17,000. So I'm pretty sure they probably have more money than that. So I think we have a lot of work to do probably with community partners to ensure that they're bringing their full budget detail to the table so that we can truly understand the work that they're doing, so that we can understand how we fund them and how we truly partner with them to do this work across the community.
We did push on a couple of the partners, and in your supplemental detail that's attached to this agenda and that you got last night, they did give you a little more information. DECA, Mirror, and some other folks did in there. I will tell you, when I meet with all these folks in April, I say the exact same thing to them, and this is what you get.
I know. And it was mentioned multiple times throughout the week too.
Right.
Yes. I mean, it has been reinforced multiple times.
I was very thrilled to get finally, especially I'm thinking DECA, who's never given us that information, and getting that now. I think we've gotten over a hump. I just think, the more we back up Sarah when she's asking that, no, it really comes into our conversation about whether we fund you or not. Please give us a story in your budget that makes intuitive sense and matches the narrative. So I'm hopefully, for all those folks who are listening to this thrilling meeting, I just want to say that out loud again. But yeah, I've struggled with that because it's work that I care about, and sometimes these are partners that I have a lot of trust that they're doing that work and doing it well, and I'm not worried about their solvency or something. But it still helps us have these conversations and hold and be fair to other partners when we've asked.
And sometimes it takes funding or not funding to encourage individuals to come to the table with what it is that Sarah and staff are asking. If you're continually asking for something and they're not providing what you need. And if in commission budget hearings as well, we're asking for something and they're still not coming to the table with what is needed, it might be time to encourage adoption. And that might be hard, right? Hard decisions for us to make and hard for them to receive. But then next year, these might be very different conversations that we can have together and truly see what each community partner is bringing to the table.
For years, the conversation was around 990s and audits, and yay, we got them to comply with that, because that was so we have access to that information and that level of detail if we want to go in and double check things or ask things. And it really just was, if you ask for a $5,000 grant anywhere, you're going to give your 990 or your audit. And it was ridiculous that we had partners that were not wanting to comply with that, but I think we're there. So so this isn't that we're just starting the process. There've been ongoing conversations and we're making progress.
Okay, commissioners, I think that's some good discussion about fund balances um, and just financial visibility and transparency. Commissioner Anderson, I believe it was you who made some mention about solvency yesterday, and I didn't take many more notes than that. So if you said a little bit more, but I don't fully remember. So I just want to make sure you ask any questions or express any concerns you have about that.
Yeah, so it was in regards to also some of our larger fund balances and knowing that we have many entities with larger fund balances, and then we have a couple of our partners that are struggling with their fund balances. And so I was just kind of curious about having conversations around whether it be headquarters or SDA Care Center, and what is our role when it comes to some of those organizations that have been around for quite some time, and they're struggling with either board development or fundraising. And then we have other entities that are truly surpassing their fundraising goals. When we think of SDA Care Center, they've been around for decades doing this work. It's difficult to think about integration and collapsing one organization into another. What is the role of the Board of County Commission to suggest or encourage that sort of movement? With another organization that is well established, I'm going to say Willow. I don't know if that could ever be an opportunity for both entities to come together and to support each other to ensure solvency. Because one entity is continuing to struggle. And so is there an opportunity for leaders to come together and to lead together and support both organizations? I don't know.
Yeah,
Knowing that the work is so important, right? And that it still needs to be done, and the need is there, and the need is not going to go away, and the need might continue to grow, unfortunately.
you were right. I will not let myself go down a victim advocate rabbit hole completely here, given all of the context and history and potential risk that there is at the loss of the care center and that organization. I think, but two things stand out to me. I want to, one, ground us in this room, in this space, in the context of a massive budget that covers so much, so many core services for our community as a county government functions, and then the funding for community partners, that I want to be sure that we do not, or I can't be sure. I feel cautious about us wading into alarmist territory with people, and that there are valid concerns to be discussed at a community-wide level, but I think that I don't want us to adopt alarmism about the potential closure of organizations because that's being felt by the organization. The other thing that stands out to me is I do think that we have to acknowledge that our role is limited in the context of what we're talking about in our budget as a funder with community partner or service agreements with these organizations. We have some very specific outlined degrees of relationship building, communication, and expectations about how those dollars are being spent, and what the organization might be participating in otherwise in the community in terms of larger initiatives or stakeholder groups. But I think that we have to be very careful to not be suggestive from this forum, from a public forum, about alternative, unless we're talking about entities becoming a county department, like as the senior resource center conversation went, that the idea that consolidation or integration of other organizations be happening is a conversation that has to start between those organizations and their boards first and foremost. And if that conversation is productive, then I think that it's up to those organizations to determine how are they seeking feedback from local government entities that are funders or partners to them? How are they seeking feedback from the people that they serve and the other community partners that they have about what those impacts might be? So I think that individually as commissioners and as elected officials, those are conversations that sometimes happen, right? That in our individual role as leaders in the community, the relationships that we have to other community partners, to other entities in the community doing work that is important to us, that those conversations are fair game to suggest ideas and thoughts and ponderings that you have individually, and throw things out there and see if they get picked up by those organizations and determined to be an idea worth exploring further. But I think that it's a slippery slope for us to get into a space of trying to be prescriptive or directive to organizations about what the solutions to their problems might be. If they're asking us for specific things, then our role is to say yes or no to those specific things, and to maybe ask some probing questions about what other avenues or solutions they may be considering, just to receive that feedback for our context. But I personally try to be really careful about being suggestive to organizations about what some of the solutions to their problems might be. And that also, it's fair to say that that's partially informed by the fact that because I work in social services for one of the organizations that we fund, and with all of the other organizations that we fund, I have a lot of additional context and information, frankly, that inform some of these requests that we have. But I really tried to be clear about saying yes or no to the requests before us, and understanding why, if I'm saying no, that I can articulate that within the context of the larger county budget and all of the decisions that we have before us, that we have to think of collectively. And that just means that we can't give full weight to everybody's needs. That was a meandering stream of consciousness. I don't know how helpful that was for you, but those are my thoughts.
Question for Sarah. I don't remember us ever having the conversation really about solvency until last year at budget. Can you just give me a history? Is that truly a thing, or I have not been here that terribly long?
I mean, I'd say occasionally, sometimes in the past, people have approached us and asked for one-time dollars for something specific. I don't know that we would have called it solvency back then. I mean, I remember an ask several years ago from Lawrence Community Shelter for some one-time dollars. So it has happened, but generally it's been an organization that we already funded. And it's hard to know, because we've really evolved in our funding of community partners. It really used to just be they could do whatever they wanted with the money. And with most of our partners now, we have a very prescribed view of what it is that we're funding. So if we're funding 6 care coordinators, they can't use that for something else. But some organizations, it's just, base funding, and as I used to call it, good people money. Your good people just continue to do good people work. So it's really evolved over time, but solvency is, I would say, I can't say we've never had it in the past.
That's helpful. I just was
Yeah.
trying to kind of check, is that felt new to me last year, and we did some work in that space, but it sounds like generally that was kind of the case, at least the volume of solvency conversation.
There have been a larger number of volume solvencies, and that last year was big. I mean, in terms of dollar amount too.
I agree with the idea that we have to be cautious of starting to manage a community partner. You know, they have their own boards. I've served on nonprofit boards, and we had someone who gave money and then they thought they could make all the decisions for the organization. And that you have to understand the totality of the organization and what they're trying to work through. So I do try to keep that lane. That said, we've had some solvency discussions that we dove deep into their books to understand the numbers they were asking about. In my opinion, that wasn't about governance. That was getting a full financial picture of where they are to determine what the level of need was. I will say I get very concerned about multiple years of solvency requests. That I'm trying to process that for me. Like, what does that, because that does feel like now we're just asking for ongoing funding. And if we were propping you up, once we propped you up, you had a plan to go forward and solve it going forward, and maybe making tough decisions in order to do that. And so I think there is a role for Douglas County to play in making sure that the system holds itself up. But I also think there's a place for us to say, we think there are certain steps before we want to provide this solvency funding. And that may be some of the things that I think I hear you suggesting, but it's not my job to say, you go do this. It's to say, at this point, what you've provided us doesn't make an argument to me that you need solvency funding to prop that up. So I just think it's something we have to be really thoughtful about. Our solvency fund for Bert Nash is a pretty unique situation because they're our operator for the treatment and recovery center. So I think that's a little bit different than maybe some of the other ones that we had. But I just want to be really cautious of trying to manage an organization from a distance. And a reminder, I mean, if we start to do that, even with the Senior Resource Center, we first asked their board, would this be something you're interested in? We didn't go to them and say, this is what we'd like you to do. And I think we took that feedback before we wanted them to think about it. And in the end, their board came to us and said, we think to maintain services for Douglas County seniors and the health of Douglas County as a whole, this would be a good move.
Any other thoughts to share? Commissioner Dorsey, do you have any thoughts, questions or concerns just about community partners otherwise that we haven't covered in our last 30 minutes of discussion or so far?
I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to have these kind of open forum discussions with the five of us about some of these topics, because I think each of us has used them in these ideas in the past to kind of fill out our own spreadsheets. And maybe we had those conversations with individual partners, but we really hadn't had that kind of high level, like we don't have to be all on the same page, but it's really interesting and I think helpful for us to hear how some of these levels of how we're processing the requests in front of us. So I thought this was really valuable.
Agree.
I do have one question that sort of is percolating up. We have a couple of one-time requests that in the narrative, they said it would lower their operating costs. And then we provide operating costs. And so from a financial standpoint, my brain says, I'd rather pay more on the front side and reduce the operating costs long-term. But we haven't really asked partners that, and they've just volunteered it, like by doing this one time, and it's typically a capital investment. By doing this one-time investment, how much will you save year to year? I'm interested to hear other commissioners' reaction to that or thoughts on that.
I think there might be some examples where we've paid off mortgages thinking that operating costs would go down, and then they didn't go down.
And then the question is, did they, presumably they then expanded services with that additional revenue? And were those services that, we wanted to see as a county and that they fall into our priorities? Or did we really just need a decrease in funding as a result? So, and frankly, I'm not sure I'm not sure each partner that we've done that with, I'd have the same answer.
Yeah, I would agree. I think sometimes one may not anticipate. They might think that they may gain something from what they're suggesting, and then maybe that's not really what ends up happening. Or you're hoping that it will actually achieve a certain outcome, and it doesn't actually get you what you want. But in the end, it would be nice if they would come back and say, we thought we were going to get X, and we really got LMNOPQ, right? And this is what your dollars that you funded really ended up resulting in. But I don't think that's what we've been seeing either. So that I wish that would be something that partners would come back with if we're not seeing what they initially thought we would actually see. So yeah, I'm not overly in favor of funding some of those capital requests.
Share, but helpful comments to hear. I agree, Commissioner Riley. I think that this is it's helping ground me in some of my thoughts that I've been having throughout the past couple of weeks as we've moved through this process, really. So thank you, staff, for waiting on us to have the weekend to work on our spreadsheets. I think that this is a really good foundational discussion, and I have great confidence that we'll move through that pretty quick and easy once we start on Monday.
Is there anything else you really feel like you need before Monday from staff? Want to make sure commissioners feel like they have as many tools and information available to them as possible?
I have one thing that I've dabbled in. I haven't gotten through the whole book with on a second pass, kind of with this different set of eyes, which was, we've been looking for, levers, as we call them, like places to potentially free up some funds for this group to then look at where we want those best spent. And the sheriff's budget has some big jumps in commodities, contractual, and their equipment reserve that I don't feel like I have a full understanding of those. Is something that's worth bringing the sheriff back and asking those things, or if I'm the only one who has concerns over those? Contractual is up. This was in operating, not the jail. Contractual is up 18%, commodities up 28%, and the transfer to the equipment reserve was up 22%. I would say that some of those corresponded to decreases on the jail side. So it's not that I have big flags. I just have areas that I'd like to understand better. But if it's just me, we have plenty of work on our plates.
I hear you, but I don't co-sign the concerns in particular.
Yeah, I think especially because that's an elected office, I think they have some flexibility in that budget. I'm really looking for the percentage of increase down on the total is really where I'm going, because I think my first year I interrogated the sheriff about jail food costs and learned early on, like, maybe I didn't want to get that deep in the weeds. That being said, I mean, if an individual commissioner wants to reach out, I've talked to one or two partners since our budget hearings just to understand more about something. I think that's totally appropriate.
And I just have other areas that I'm focusing on. So that's probably not an area that I'm like digging into the weeds.
I think we're good then.
Okay. Well, yeah, my last two things were to make sure that staff has any requests for additional information that they can get to us this afternoon, and that any of our questions about the spreadsheet and how
Yeah, I
use
had
that
a question about the spreadsheet. if we take exception to something, a line item, say in a bigger number on the spreadsheet, do we put notes out to the side?
I
On
think,
what-
yeah, you
or
can
just
put it
talk
out to the
about it?
side, or you could just put it in the email to us. I
Okay.
think, yeah, that would be helpful. It would be good that if you want to see a dollar amount reduction, like you could put a dollar amount reduction in that line item. So that would be a good flag
Okay.
for us. But your notes, is really helpful on what you're thinking there.
Okay.
And then I think generally how we try to do that is if there's consensus on something, the budget options are easiest because they're listed out. But then eventually we'll get down to if an individual commissioner had something that was one line item, then we can talk about how we want to approach that. It would be really helpful if when commissioners, if they could email Brooke and me your spreadsheets by 5 on Sunday. So Brooke isn't up till midnight trying to compile them. And then that way we're ready for 9 a.m. on Monday morning. And then my hope is that we will not necessarily show the consolidated sheets, because with 5, it gets really small on that screen, even as huge as it is. But maybe we'll just have the listing of what had 5, what had 4, what had 3, what had 2, what had 1, and then other topics for conversation. We can sort of develop that listing. Does that make sense?
I think I prefer not to have the individual ones up there because sometimes I'll put in a dollar amount that is really to flag the discussion and not
Right.
necessarily something I'm married to. So
Right.
I like how we did it last year. And
That's
doing
great.
it.
Yeah. And I would just say, if just, make notes too. If it's not 100% precise, or if it does something with the mill levy you don't want to do, you're not married to any of this. This is all just to help bring us forward. And I really appreciate the entire commission's just dedication and thoroughness and completeness in which you all do this work. You are a service to the community to spend this kind of time on this, and really, really appreciate the work that you've already put in, and I know you're going to put in this weekend. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you all for your time, because you have spent a lot of time and you've been redoing things too, because we've been asking a lot of questions. And so just really appreciate you all for your time as well. I know it's been a lot of time.
All right, commissioners, with that, I believe we are adjourned for week 1 of budget hearings, and we will be back Monday at 9 a.m. Have a good weekend.